There's a drug called methyltheobromine. It has an addictive capture rate of anywhere between 8 to 28%. Overuse of it can cause anxiety, insomnia, fatigue, high blood pressure, muscle decay, and even death. It is usually taken orally with other substances. It has many street names: dirt, lightning water, liquid lead, a cup of death. But you might know it more as coffee, the world's most commonly used drug. The way our society understands drugs is quite frankly a total mess. We've separated drugs as harmful or medicinal, but what's harmful or medicinal isn't well defined, because what's harmful for one person could be medicinal for others, which is why we usually leave these things up to doctors and patients, case by case. Unless we don't. We also classify different drugs into different class based on their potential harm. Unless we don't. But it's precisely this type of class regulation that I want to look at. Why are drugs like caffeine, alcohol, and nicotine legal, but others are not? Who makes these decisions? When were they made? How are these regulations decided? Is it by scientific consensus, or are there moral backings for the decision? I don't really want to talk about the politics of this, because if I do, I would inevitably have to talk about K. Shanmugam, my country's Minister of Law and a champion of the death penalty. He's a very smart guy. You know what? Let's not talk about him. What I do want to talk about is the legalization of cannabis, also known as weed or marijuana. In a world that is slowly legalizing the drug, Singapore continues to classify cannabis as a Class A drug, meaning that possession of it can constitute the death penalty. It is one of the most stringent drug laws in the world. So you would think that such a law would have a strong scientific or moral backing for it. For it to be even classified in the same category as cocaine, fentanyl, and opium, and to receive the same punishment as murder and rape. So, question. What would the criteria be to determine the dangers of such a drug? How about we start simply with how addictive is it? It's actually very difficult to find accurate data of a drug's addiction rate. For some reason, when you criminalize non-violent drug offenses, people seem to be afraid to help you research the dangers of the drugs. I wonder why. All sarcastic jokes aside, I cannot stress just how dogshit statistics are for this. Finding how addictive a specific drug is was actually really difficult, because reports keeps conflating terms. The NCDAS, for example, uses the terms drug use and drug abuse interchangeably, even though they are not. If you smoked just one joint last year, you are a drug abuser according to some of their definitions. That is not science, it's bullshit. And instead of chronicling individual drugs, we tend to track all of them under licit and illicit drugs, as if they were all the same. So death by cannabis is added with the same statistics as heroin. And between the dozens of papers, reports, and articles that I've gone through, only one gave me a number that made sense. And it was an archived report from 2003 by the Wayback Machine, linked from Wikipedia. Do you know how shit your data chronicling has to be that Wikipedia is the best source? Pretty fucking shit! The number we're looking for specifically is the capture rate. How good a drug is at being able to turn people who have used the drug into people who depend on it. And cannabis is around 9%, which is pretty high. It means 1 in 10 people who use the drug will likely get addicted, until you realize that coffee is 8% and alcohol is over 15%. Tobacco is almost 32%, and those drugs are all legal in Singapore. Even in other studies without accurate capture rates that compares different drugs, that ranking never really changes much. So addiction rates cannot be the reason why cannabis is illegal. So it must be something else. So we'll move on to the next possibility. How dangerous is a drug? Like with a drugs capture rate, the collection of data of death rates by drugs is actually pretty shite. The numbers are there, but nobody actually ever put them together for no real reason I can determine. And this is just my personal opinion. But if I was a politician, like a certain minister for law trying to defend the indefensible, or a multi-million dollars corporation that sells vices to people, I would want to keep these numbers hard to comprehend. I would want these numbers to be as obscure as possible. Thankfully, I have nothing better to do with my life, so I collected the numbers and went to do some math. That's right, I did math for this. The horrors I've seen. By using population data, death data, and some really conservative usage data, we can calculate cannabis use death rate to be around 0.0018%, and that's on the high side. This includes accidents where the users were found to have cannabis in their system, even if other drugs were also found. So it's a very broad definition we're using. But with that definition, it means if everyone in the world takes weed, around 150,000 people will die, which is bad. Until you realize alcohol kills 3 million people every year, and we don't all drink alcohol. Still, it kills 20 times more people than cannabis. Smoking tobacco is harder to analyze because there's also secondhand smoke, which also kills a lot of people. And there are some companies who are working really hard to make that number secret. So I'm just gonna put a lot on my math chart and move on. But what I'm trying to say is the damage isn't proportional to existing laws. If we deem cannabis, which has a lower addiction and death rate than alcohol and tobacco, to deserve the death penalty, why don't those other two drugs, which has done quantifiably more damage to society, get the same treatment? Hey, future Aiden here. I was running this video's research through my friends, and they pointed out that isn't cannabis a gateway drug? I don't know how I completely forgot to address that in the original script, but no, it's not. At least not as much as you think. Here's the research to show that alcohol is actually more of a gateway. In fact, caffeine is also a gateway drug. But it did make me ask a different question. Why do we have bars? I know, whiplash, but follow me on this short story, because once we answer that, we can answer the more important question. Why is cannabis known as a gateway drug? Now, throughout human history, we humans have generally liked doing a few things. Getting high, getting calm, getting energetic. And we have tried to achieve those state of minds through many different substances. And we usually settle on drugs that give us those feelings with minimal drawbacks. That's why we have alcohol and weed, cigarettes and weed, and coffee and weed. See, the thing about addiction that most people don't understand is that it's not a monolith. Addicts don't just want all drugs. They want drugs that do specific things. I used to be addicted to painkillers, but that's because I was chasing pain relief. I won't just suddenly move on to cocaine or shroom because I wasn't chasing what those drugs were selling. Similarly, if you smoke cigarettes, you don't move on to injecting yourself with black tar heroin. And if you smoked weed, you don't just move on to sniffing cocaine. If you can get legal beer, you will have no reason to move on to potentially poisonous bootlegs. And when we banned cannabis in Singapore, we didn't stop the drugs from coming in. Because if we did, we would stop catching drug traffickers. The fact that we still catch them means that there's an amount coming in that makes it financially viable to do so. Do you know how when you go into a convenience store to buy a sandwich or something and the counter has chocolate and candies that tempt you into impulse buying them? That's basically what we're doing. During the 1920s, the US enacted prohibition, which made alcohol sales illegal. So when the US banned alcohol, illegal speakeasies opened. And when you're already buying or selling one illegal substance, the drawbacks of buying or selling other illegal substance is minimal. So speakeasies also started selling drugs. And the use of harder, more dangerous drugs actually rose. And when we make a drug like cannabis illegal, instead of having a dispensary selling regulated cannabis, we now have dealers who also just so happens to have heroin at the counter, like candies to entice a buyer. We don't have bars to sell alcohol. We have them so the people selling alcohol don't also sell heroin. Do you remember that little rant earlier about how difficult it was to find statistics for addiction rates? I'm sure you do. You're all very handsome and beautiful with a good memory. That's why I respect all of you. Except you, Greg, I hate you. Unlike other obviously dangerous illicit drugs like opioids and heroin, the fact that news outlets still openly ask how dangerous is cannabis is itself the problem. We don't know. On PubMed, there are over 30,000 papers studying cannabis, but over 60,000 studying nicotine, and an ungodly amount studying alcohol. I think scientists are just alcoholics, which makes sense. There are more papers written on caffeine than cannabis. We never fully researched it because of how cannabis was tainted by history. We never got the chance. A history, by the way, shrouded with colonialism and racism. It was a recreational drug popular with the old world. You know, the non-white part? And the reason why Singapore banned it was because our British colonizers were following Mauritius, and their British colonizers banned the drugs because it made their Indian slaves too happy, whatever the fuck that means. And we have basically kept that same law ever since. Hey guys, Future Aiden here. So I'm doing a little bit of extra research on the Second Geneva Opium Convention, where the international community of the time just comes together to, decide what drugs are bad. And this guy, the Prime Minister of Africa at the time, he came and was like, "Yo, man, you see all these black people smoking weed? That's a problem. My black friend here says so too." And Egypt, a relatively new country on the international stage at the time, was like, "Ah, shit. What you gotta do a brother like this?" Basically went, Yeah, weed's bad. Can I join your club? Yeah. Cannabis is bad. Just, let me join your club. These two basically convinced the entire international convention, like, yeah, weed is bad. It's as bad as opium, the thing that we gave to the Chinese to kill them. Everyone at the convention basically went, oh, yeah, cannabis bad, weed bad. You know what? Let's ban it. Let's ban it all. Ban all cannabis. Let's ban Indian hemp. And India was like, "Yo, bro, what you doing? I'm just chilling here, man. Why are you doing this to me?" Indian hemp grows everywhere. There's no practical way to just ban it. It's like on the ground, And they were like, all right. Compromise. You keep your Indian hemp where we can see them. And that's basically how international prohibition on marijuana started. It's so stupid. Oh, right. I was at the serious part of the video. Back to you, Pass Aiden. We have created laws based on shoddy numbers, misunderstandings, and a history of racism for a drug that has caused less harm than other legal substances, and it is having real consequences today. Over the past decade, Singapore has executed 4 people for offences regarding marijuana. Another one has died while on death row, and those are just the ones we know of. Even more are on death row for other low-level offences. Most of them are minorities and people who are mentally vulnerable. And I see how good we have gotten at twisting the words of research. We've been doing this for years. In a 2021 survey of Singaporeans' attitudes towards the death penalty, we asked if people were okay with the penalty for trafficking a significant amount of drugs without ever properly defining what significant means. Is it 5 kilos of weight? Is it 10? Is it 100? Or just 1 kilo? That's the weight of a small fucking laptop. And that's what we killed Tanggaroja Supaya for. A vulnerable man we never bothered to reform, jailing him for his whole life until we found a reason to get rid of him. I want you to think about that. Minister Shanmugam, as our foremost defender on the death penalty for cannabis possession, you have to answer for all the blood on your hands. I have tracked your crusade for cannabis death penalties for years, and I have some serious questions about the ethics of your position. In 2019, you stated that 1 in 2 cannabis users get addicted, even though your own IMH review of 500 papers says the number is actually 1 in 10, and that it was only 1 in 2 for daily users. Did you just lie or misspoke? Or do you actually not understand the review you're citing that's allowing you to kill people under our judicial system? And under your administration, the Central Narcotics Bureau has misinformation in videos that I can only consider outright lies. And as a writer with almost 2 decades of experience, I know when I'm being juked by words. The review on medical cannabis by IMH doesn't say anything that doesn't also apply to alcohol and tobacco on a much, much higher scale. Do you know what else also stunts the mental growth of children when taken at a young age? Coffee. Kind of hypocritical, isn't it, Minister Shanmugam? I'm not even saying to legalize cannabis. I'm just saying we should probably stop killing people for it. How fucked up is it that we have the same consequences for disproportionately poor people owning grass that makes you chill as we do with the shooty bang bang sticks, which if you're rich enough, you get to play with. So I'll leave you with this quote from a supposed old drug education website commissioned by the NCADA. There are 3 good reasons for hooding the prisoner. Firstly, it is very important that the condemned person does not move at the last moment, just as the lever is being pulled, which could easily alter the position of the noose and thus cause them a slow death. The second reason is to minimize rope burns and marking of the skin. The third is so they don't have to look at you. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I'm on a chair because I hurt my leg. I didn't expect this video to be about the death penalty, but here it is. As you can tell, I'm against the death penalty quite entirely, but this video isn't meant to dissuade people on that. Just at the very least, I think killing people for weed is ridiculously monstrous in my view. Anyway, thanks to my lovely patrons. If you that's a whiplash of a turn. Thanks to my lovely patrons. If you want to support me, you can go to patreon.com/Aiden_Ng. You will get early access to my videos. And if I can get enough supporters, I'll open a Discord channel for all of us to hang out in. The next video will be the last one this year, so like, share, comment, and subscribe. All the YouTube things. I will see you next time. Bye bye.